Hey guys, welcome to my car. I spend an awful lot of time in here, driving around every day, and it's pretty common that I've got a few minutes in between clients. I get a lot of thinking done then. It occurs to me that it might be nice to shoot some more off-the-cuff videos, some more raw type footage, less editing, less thought and scripting going into it, just sharing whatever's crossed my mind in the moment. So this is the first time I'm trying to do that. I hope it's not obnoxious. Let me know what you think. Mother Teresa was canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church yesterday, and today is her official feast day, September 5th. I guess by the time this is online, it'll be tomorrow, so everything I just said is out of date by one day, at least. Anyway, I'm reminded of this goofy old country song. A guy's complaining about his ex's new love interest, right? He's not impressed by any of the guy's good qualities, so he's just like going on about it. So all of his complaints build to this crescendo, and he yells, so he spends vacations working with Mother Teresa in India. So what? That kind of superficiality can wear pretty thin. Always makes me laugh. But in recent years, that's become a little more poignant as she's become a person of controversy. There are many, many well-meaning Christians who haven't looked into the actual information, can't understand why people would be critical of such a wonderful woman as Mother Teresa. They have such high regard for her that it's hard for them to see past it to reality, to a real person. And there are many others, mostly people who are eager to cut down a prominent Christian figure, who want to vilify her, cast her as a figure of selfishness and cruelty. And that position is probably no more honest than all the Christians who want to, admire her wholeheartedly and without critique. I mean, the reality is she's just a person. She did a lot of good things. She did a lot of those things incompletely, imperfectly. She failed to do a lot of good things. And ultimately, she's a relic of a bygone era. You know, our aesthetic sensibility has changed so much since she began this ministry that we're critiquing her from a position totally unlike the one that reflects her own mindset. All right, I gotta go see somebody. I'll be back. One thing's for sure about recording in the city on the go like this, there's a whole lot more life going on around me. Anyway, I was talking about how Mother Teresa is just a person with flaws, and she's a product of her age, as in her era, not, her biological age. Even though those two things are pretty related to each other, right? Anyway, it seems like this isn't really so much about her. She's being used by two sides of an argument about suffering and compassion. And so that's what this video is about. I'm really not so interested in arguing about the morality of Mother Teresa's ministries, right? I want to talk about suffering and compassion. But also, she elected not to ease the suffering of some people. I don't pretend to understand the reasons why she did that. However, there are a couple things she said that I think are key to this conversation. The first is, she said that people who are suffering, especially the people she was ministering to, are participating in some way in the suffering of Jesus. And the second thing is that somehow the world might benefit from the suffering of these people. Now, it's easy to, It's easy to just scoff and write those two things off without even considering them. Here's why I don't. Because these are two powerful ways of giving meaning to suffering. This isn't anything new. People have been using these ideas to find some kind of significance or purpose in their own suffering for a long, long time. The idea that suffering can be redemptive, the idea that since we can't change our suffering, at least some good might come from our suffering for ourselves and for other people, these are powerful and empowering ideas. So why are they so ugly when she says them? Well, I have a few ideas. The first is that not all suffering is redemptive. Sometimes people suffer, no good comes from it, it's just horrible. And that doesn't feel good. We don't get to make ourselves feel better about it. There's no compassion that helps that. That's the reality of the world. But also the idea that suffering can be redemptive is not justification for prolonging suffering. Just because we can use these ideas to give meaning to our suffering doesn't mean that, therefore, all of our suffering serves this purpose and we shouldn't try to interrupt it. We shouldn't try to end it. In many religious circles, suffering becomes this thing that's good in its own right. There's something holy and sacred about suffering for its own sake. One of my favorite stories is from the life of Hildegard of Bingen. She's talking about effectively her roommate at the monastery, Jutta von Sponheim. Jutta was a young, frail girl. She had some terrible experiences. She was haunted by them. She lived a life of extreme asceticism. She would go without eating. She would put herself under harsh conditions unnecessarily. And the idea was that this had a purifying effect on her, that she was somehow holy or special because of it. And it went so far as to make her weak and frail and contribute to her death. And Hildegard would say, it wasn't the Lord of Life that Jutta was courting through these acts of worship. Her lover was death. Her beloved was death. There is something perverse about this fascination with suffering. The dominant religious tradition says, when suffering comes, read it like this. But why would you seek it out? Why would you take on suffering that's unnecessary? That's not considering life holy. That's not respecting the sacredness of your own life. So seeking out suffering intentionally seems to just run counter to the whole religious tradition. But that's not even getting at the heart of all this yet. If a suffering person uses these ideas to give meaning to their suffering, well, that's an empowering move. That's a decision they're making for themselves. It's an assertion of the self in the face of suffering that they can't change. Now, suppose someone else tells you, here's the meaning in your suffering. And because your suffering has meaning, I'm not in any hurry to stop it. That's a whole different ballgame. That's not empowering. That's rationalizing someone's suffering to the point that you fail to have compassion, or at least your efforts at compassion fall far short of the goal. Now take that a step further. Say I've taken on responsibility for your care, and you're suffering greatly, and there are a lot of other people around who are suffering too. Well, to cope with all that going on around me, I have to rationalize your suffering somehow. That's just a way of helping me cope with the situation I'm in, trying to be compassionate. But let's say that because of my beliefs about your suffering, I don't do everything I can do to ease your suffering. To the extent that, say I have medication that will ease your suffering or even end your suffering, and I elect not to give it to you because that might rob you of the meaningful experience of suffering. And I might rob the world of whatever theoretical benefit there might be in your suffering. And that's why this argument isn't really about Mother Teresa. This is an argument about the very nature of suffering and compassion and how we try to cope with it. Because the very tools we use to cope with our suffering can be used as tools of oppression. Mother Teresa is a relic of an age when we hadn't realized the issues of colonial thinking and privilege and all of that. But we have the opportunity to learn from this history of condescending compassion, and we have the ability to not continue engaging in it. And so ultimately, what's the point? When I suffer, I need to find a way to give that meaning. And I can ask and I can learn and I can listen from other people, but ultimately it's my choice. And when you suffer, it is not my job to give your suffering meaning. And if I dare try to tell someone else what the meaning of their suffering is in the moment when they're suffering, I'm adding to their suffering. So this plays into a bigger conversation that I want to have at some point, where the things that oppressed people can say are true, people with privilege can't say the same way, right? I can say this is true about me and my people and our experience. If you say it's true about me, it's not true, because the things we say don't have this independent value of truth on their own. They're not neutral statements. They come from the position of power we have. And if I'm in a position of weakness and I say, this is true about me, or this is true about my people, then okay, that's one thing. But if I'm in a position of power and I say, this is true about you and your people, that's different. It's not true. So the conditions in which we speak have everything to do with the truth value of the things we're saying. I'm not going to get into that more right now. That's a conversation I want to have more later. But there is plenty of room for disagreement here, guys. And I want to hear it. I want to hear it all. What are your thoughts about this? What do we do with suffering? And what do we do with compassion? How do we have compassion for others without being condescending? What does that mean? What kind of models can we use for that? If Mother Teresa is not the model for compassion moving into the future, who is? What is? Where do we go from here? Share your thoughts in the comments below. That would be awesome. I want to respond to them all. If you liked a video like this, please give it a like, subscribe for more. Let me know if you want more of these raw kind of videos. Thanks for watching.